Thank you, and good afternoon. I am super excited to be here with you today and also introduce this distinguished panel. And so I have long bios for all of them, but I'm not going to read them all. And so let me go in order that you see folks here. So I'm going to start with Michael Phillips. Michael Phillips is the Chief Operating Officer of TDJ Enterprises. He's also been a longtime innovator in social entrepreneurship. He's also an author and speaker. His book, Wrong Lanes Have Right Turns, if I got that right. I actually just started reading this myself, and so highly recommend it as well. And he also serves as the chairman of 50 CAN. And so welcome, Michael Phillips. And then also want to introduce Yolanda Lewis, who serves as the, you have a long title as well, right? So, Executive Vice President of Health and Justice at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. And previously, Yolanda worked at Pew Charitable Trusts, where she supported efforts to improve public safety, performance, mental health, and the civil legal system modernization. She also served as a district court administrator for the Atlanta Judicial Court. And perhaps my favorite is she's also has experience as an executive producer, host, and commentator for several TV shows covering justice-related issues. And so excited to have Yolanda Lewis with us. And then last but certainly not least, you've heard Mike Merzenich referenced actually throughout today at different times. We'll formally introduce Mike. Mike is the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Posit Science and Stronger Brains, and author of Soft-Wired: How the New Science of Brain Plasticity Can Change Your Life. He's written a few articles, and when I say a few, it's nearly 300 in leading peer-reviewed journals. And we were talking about patents earlier. He knows a thing or two about that, having nearly 100 patents in his work. And so Mike is now just hitting about 30 years old now, right? I think, and he did all that in a very short period of time. So I just want to welcome. It's truly an honor to have such a distinguished panel. And I think we'll just get started. So I want to, in contrast to the last panel that did all the preparation, kind of met in advance. We're a little bit more raw. We had a virtual meeting. Some of us met just for the first time physically today. And so if you guys have seen Eddie Murphy Raw, maybe I'm dating myself. It's maybe not quite like that, but a little bit raw. And we'll just watch our language. so it won't be maybe it won't be quite like that. But all joking aside, right? I think when we think about kind of the topic, right, that we've been talking about all day, right, and being part of and becoming actionists, right, as Sandy asked us to be, this is a very large ecosystem, many levers that we need to pull in this. And I think the point of this conversation in many ways is to make sure that we're really thinking about all individuals when we're thinking about this movement, right? And so not everyone in the communities that we've served, right, have a Fitbit or an Oura Ring or things like that. And so this so that's I'm excited about this panel. We have a very kind of diverse set of experiences and perspectives to bring to this. So I'm going to start, given the unique perspectives that we have, and we can just go down the row here, is each of you brings this unique perspective to the work. Can you just share a little bit about why optimizing brain health is so important to you? And we can start with Michael.
I'm sorry? All right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much, Laura, for having me to be here. Really honored to be on this panel. And after hearing the panel in front of me, I said a deep prayer on my chair because, this is not my background at all. And I can only speak from the lens of my own personal experience and the experience of many people in my community. But for me, I grew up in a very traumatized neighborhood. My childhood was riddled with all sorts of atrocities, and knew nothing about ACEs score, none of those things. That wasn't something that was talked about where I grew up. And so having those type of experiences in my life and enduring what I had to endure, this topic becomes especially important to me at my stage in my career, in my life. I've dedicated my life to helping people live better, all people, but certainly I want my community to live better as well. And because when we have initiatives like this that are talked about at the treetop levels with great intention, oftentimes it does not get to the root of what we're trying to solve. And so making sure that this is inclusive, making sure that we have many people at the table as part of the discussion is going to be paramount to the success of whatever we're trying to do for brain health.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I know we'll come back to some of those themes. Yolanda, you want to share?
Sure. I also want to thank Sandy, Laura, for being here. I think we were sharing a prayer. I mean, I think talking about the justice system is difficult no matter where you talk about it. And I think it was only when we had a conversation initially that I thought about the impact of the justice system on brain health. It made it so tangible for me. And so I've spent about 20 years plus working in systems where individuals are impacted. And that's an individual level concept. But what we often don't talk about is that those people are attached to children, they're attached to spouses, they're attached to communities. And the level of trauma that goes into some of these things that are so pronounced that we see every day, whether that is about arrest of a person who has a mental health issue or worse, really have a deep impact on communities across the country. And I think having conversations like the one we will have today really helps to make it tangible that there's a way to have a level of possibility and hope around some of the most tragic issues that we have to kind of navigate. And this forum has given me kind of that first step of being able to articulate that in a very hopeful way. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some of the work that we're doing that's really cutting edge, that will build community resiliency, but also just make good sense. It just makes good sense. So I'm very glad to be here.
Great. Thank you. Mike?
There is nothing that could be more powerfully transformative for us than to take brain health seriously and to be constantly, continuously monitoring the status of brain health. Should be monitored every year, at least annually, in every citizen. And on the basis of seeing a movement in a direction in which our brain health is going to be compromised or a risk for failure from the time we're born, you could say until the time we die, not responding to it is ridiculous in this current day and age because we have the power to do that. And we should be doing that on a large scale. It's disgraceful. We have a large underclass in America. They're behind the 8 ball almost from the beginning of life. They're beyond that 8 ball. It's a persistent underclass. We've done almost nothing to reduce it, to really help it, to find all of those individuals that struggle in it in a especially powerful way. And why don't we? It's immoral that we've gone this far with the advance of science that relates to being able to drive corrections in brains to let it get to this state. But virtually all of us at some point in our life have neurological struggles. And that our brain health system should be sensitive to all of us and the potential emergence of struggles in all of us, of course. It should be about wellness, not about correcting disaster. Medicine that relates to the brain reflects is focused on waiting until the train is off the track. You can no longer take care of yourself. You can no longer operate as an effective human being. And then the doctor says, he gives you a label. You get the standard of care is applied. It's never cured. That curing is never an endpoint. But in a plastic brain, we have the potential to drive the brain to normalcy. We have the potential to do something that's rarely done in neurology and psychiatry. We have the potential to cure, and that's exactly what we should be trying to do. We should be trying to look at each individual and their individual weaknesses and distortions, and we should be trying to help them find the way to be back normal again, operationally effective again. And finally, I'm inspired by this, have been inspired by this issue for a long time, because I see the tremendous power for all of us of understanding that we have the potential to grow continuously across the period of our life. A number of people have talked about that. But not to help everyone amongst us understand that we have the potential to be better, stronger, more effective, to be able to do things next year that we can't do this year. That in every day, week, month, year of our life, we can be advancing and not retreating or going into contraction or going into decline. Every citizen be taught that. Absolutely every child should learn that lesson in school. There should be, for God's sake, in every school, a brain class where children actually, there are no brain classes in schools in America. What the hell is that, right? So anyway, I'm highly motivated.
Thank you. Love the motivation. Love the enthusiasm too. And you,
Excessive motivation.
you know, a number of themes. I think that we want to come back to. I think we want to come back to the education system as well. As we think about, I think, some of the systemic challenges, right? Especially thinking about our most vulnerable populations. I think it might be helpful just before we start moving in the solution space, just to name maybe some of those systemic challenges that through your work that you've seen. Whether it's, and we can start with the justice system and then you know, add from there if that makes sense. Yolanda, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of what, you know, the baseline conversation needs to be for justice, the justice system more broadly, is that it's the great multiplier of vulnerabilities. So if you think about the idea that a person comes into the justice system and they were poor, what happens 40 days after they've been incarcerated for a period of time and they have a behavioral health condition where they never had access to care even before they got there? You think about things like trauma and grief that are multiplied when you kind of come into a system that is not set up for that. You think about levels of homelessness that don't really just apply to the person that is in the system, but it applies to everyone connected to them. And so all of these barriers and all of these vulnerabilities are multiplied excessively when people have engagement with the mental health, with the justice system. And so part of the strategy is trying to make sure that we can divert people, particularly people who are sick. This is not, just one last thing, and I'll turn it over to Michael. It is not uncommon for people who have behavioral health issues to be diagnosed for the very first time when they come through the doors of a jail. That's sickening. That means that we have missed the mark for many years along the way. And so really thinking about how we can be better stewards of the systems that are in place and how we can be more thoughtful and innovative about how we navigate vulnerabilities is very important in the work that we have to do.
Yeah, to add to that, I think we have to change our view of how we invest in people. So, for example, if you just took juvenile justice, and my numbers could be a little off, so you can fact check me later. But if you just took juvenile justice, on average, we're spending about $90K to incarcerate a teenager. The last time I checked, the average per pupil spending for a child to be educated each year was about, somewhere around $14,000. So $90K to lock you up, $14,000 to help educate you. There is an imbalance there in terms of our investment of how we view the possibility of growth versus how we view the convenience of punishment. We need to have a culture of possibility rather than a culture of punishment. And to be able to do that, we have to change how we think about investing in the future of individuals.
My religion is that when a person basically commits an offense in which they're eligible to be banished from the rest of us, that's a cry for neurological help. And they should go to a health center in which the whole objective is to help them get past it. I mean, they're obviously struggling, and they need to get past those struggles, and the struggles are here. This is where the correction needs to be made, and they need to be made with kindness and understanding, not by taking revenge. A revenge strategy, based strategy, of course, is just completely counterproductive. So what we do now on the basis of our scientific understanding of this and what's happening to the brain and all these processes and what the histories of these individuals are is completely amoral, given that scientific understanding. We have to get past this. The juvenile justice system, there is nothing we could do, almost nothing we could do in American society would have a stronger positive impact on this nation than actually address this problem with sensitivity and humanity on a scientific basis. What we do now is unacceptable.
No, Mike, I needed you before they locked me up, man. If I would have had you around, it would have been good. No, seriously. No, I'm serious about that. Part of my story, I was an athlete and all that wonderful things. And when you grow up in a community that is full of trauma, there are two things you have to understand. The trauma that you cannot transform, you will ultimately transmit, right? And the second thing that you need to understand is that it's not that you don't want to grow, and it's not that you don't want better, and it's not that you don't want to do right. It's none of those things. It's just that scarcity is every day. When I was a little kid, I had one of those, if you guys remember this, I had one of those beanbag punch things where you would punch it, and it was weighted at the bottom with some sand, and you would punch it, and it would go down and come back up. And we would call that resilient, right, as a definition. But resilience is not about how you endure, it's how you recharge. In other words, that little beanbag thing that I would punch would go down, and then over time it would deplete and not have any bounce back because the air was gone out of it. We're talking about communities who constantly have the air knocked out of them. And that's the environment in which I grew up in. And as a consequence of that, I made some very poor decisions, but was facing 30 years of incarceration. I'll be 50 next year. That means I would be getting out of prison next year, rather than helping to create whole communities where I helped to build a school where 800 students go to school there, built an entire solar farm so that the community could have healthy foods and eradicated the food desert, cut violence in that community by 40% just by the work that we were doing in that community. None of that would have happened. Talk about brain capital. None of that capital would have happened in that community if I was locked up behind bars. And so, to Mike's point, I wish we had that level of empathy during that time.
Can I just talk about this idea of resiliency? And Mike, I think it's just so important to really make clear that when things happen to people, particularly in communities that are disadvantaged, it happens to the whole community. So, for instance, we have a project we call person-centered triage approach, where we're going into call centers across the country, actually helping them to understand that we can use evidence-informed questions and we can give a person who's calling in for help voice. Now, we thought we were going to get a lot of pushback from that, right? So we're going to ask them evidence-based questions around what's their self-perceived propensity for violence, also harm. And the reason we're going to do that is because we got science to say that we can do it, right? UC Berkeley did a study, and it suggested that people are honest to a fault even when they're in crisis. And what it means is that they will tell you if they believe they're going to hurt someone or they believe that they have a propensity for violence, something that has never been instituted in a call center. The third question is revolutionary. Getting to resilience, we're going to ask them, what is your preferred outcome? Anyone ever had to call 911? Do you get to talk? For the very first time in history, we're going to ask people, what is your preferred outcome? And why do we ask that question? Because there are communities that have never had a voice in what happens to them on the other end of that call. And so it is not to suggest that they are the only expert, but it gives us a chance to give them agency. It gives us a chance to recognize their humanity, and it gives us a chance to give them a possibility of a different outcome than what they already expect to happen to them. Now, on the other side of that, we thought that the law enforcement folks were going to be really upset about that. They're not going to do this. They said, bring it on. We'll put it in our call centers. Let's see what happens. And the reason they're doing that is because historically, communities that have to call for help and really don't want to, they think their children are going to end up in a body bag. They think that the outcome is going to end up in arrest. But what if we did something different? And what if that different started from the point that we asked them, what do you want to happen to your son today? Can we help them? Do you want to get him to the hospital? Do you want to get him medication? It's a very novel process to just ask the question. It means something so big to a community that has never been asked the question. So when you talk about possibility, you can foster possibility in the most simple ways. And we're doing that with the projects that we're doing, trying to reiterate to folks that crisis is not a crime. And we can ask people to help us de-escalate situations if we just have enough courage to ask the question.
Thank you for that.
We've developed models of brain training strategies that we're now trying to apply in prison release programs and in its alternate sentencing programs. I think that basically that should be a fundamental aspect of what we consider how we can help a young offender, an offender of any age, in fact. And we should make them neurologically, you could say, prepared to move back into society and to operate more effectively with a better chance of having an effective and useful life amongst us again, and a happy life. I also think that basically a person should be sentenced to correction. And when they're neurologically corrected, and we can say objectively, and it's critical that the determination is objective, that they are back into a normal status, then they should go home. I don't care if that's done in a month or 2 years or 5 years, whatever it takes, that should be the sentence. Now imagine if I'm sitting in a prison, I've obviously offended, they won't let me live with them anymore, they send me away. If my whole job is my neurological self-correction, and I've given the resources and that's a real possibility, and people are measuring things continually and helping me, guide me on the path to real correction, I would take that job very seriously. And I think that's a far fairer approach. And also, we need to obviously change the prison itself to make it a reasonable place to implement a reform-based project like that. It should be more like a college or a clinic than it is a prison. But we have, the justice system in this respect needs to undergo a complete transformation. There's nothing more broken in our nation than the way we treat someone that's offended us.
Thank you for that. We've already started tipping our toe into the solution, and kind of ideas for solution. I want to dive deeper into that and just thinking about what are strategies, I guess, as you think about both through your work as well as other ideas you might have about how we can truly accelerate brain health, I think, for our most vulnerable populations. And we can stay with the justice system, and we can also introduce the education system as well, because you started, I know, with some examples with schools too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there ought to be, an initiative for brain health in K through 12 education and throughout from the get-go. We ought to be implementing this at early stages throughout all of our communities for it to be truly effective, especially in our schools, because oftentimes, unfortunately, you are sort of incarcerated to the capability of what you can accomplish with your mind in many of our schools. And so if we had this sort of program or this sort of initiative, this sort of campaign through K through 12 education as a policy, That would be truly powerful.
Do you have thoughts on what that would look like?
I don't know what it would look like. That's why I was saying the deep prayer over there, man. I was trying. Look, I don't know what that would look like, But there are many intelligent people in this room that can formulate that and think about what that would look like. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this idea of trying to get to young people as early as you can to inspire hope in them is just so very critical. So, I will tell you, I'm gonna get back to the justice system in just a second, but I grew up in rural America. They used to call the area I live in called 20 trees. Like there was nothing but trees and dirt roads. And I remember not knowing that I didn't have what other folks had outside of my community, right? Like I didn't know that I wasn't maybe getting the best of the education. I didn't know that I didn't know I was poor until I left. And when I left, I had like this epiphany. My mom used to send me with doctors in the middle of the summer to kind of learn what they do. And I saw other kids and I was just floored that I wasn't getting the same level of interaction in the world that they did. And so we made a very concerted effort to really think about how I could get all of the things that they had. And I will tell you, it made a huge difference in my life personally. I still love my rural roots. I still appreciate my modest upbringing, but it makes a hell of a difference when you had someone to tell you you could achieve something. And that needed to start when I was really, really young. Okay, so that's my personal story. Getting to the part about just how we need to kind of think about, I just want to tell you one more project that we're doing that really gets to the heart of early intervention. I don't know if you all know this or not, but 4 in 10 children in America grow up with a parent that is incarcerated, has been convicted of at least 1 felony, or they have interactions that have removed them from the home in the justice system. That's millions of children without parental guidance. What we also are learning is that when that happens, the level of grief and trauma that the child experiences is similar to a death. It's called ambiguous loss. So the same effects that you would have gotten if your parent had died is the same effect that you're going to get when they are removed from the home. And that can be very traumatizing. And usually there's not a school, there's not an institution that will say, hey, are you okay? I heard that your parent is removed from the home. Most people don't even ask. But we know this is happening. And so part of what we're thinking about connecting this back to the education system is that if if a person comes into jail, we're just going to ask a few additional questions. Do you have an underage child that is in school or in this community? And what is that going to allow us to do? Then say, can we provide them some type of service that wraps around them? And we're doing this, we're testing this out. You'll be happy. Dallas is one of the sites that we're testing this theory of change. But what it means is that for the very first time, we're suggesting to children that you don't have to get in trouble in order to get help. Your parent can be the same trigger to get you help as if you were in trouble. So we're going to prevent you from having to go through that process. We're going to intercept and intervene and give you services that are going to help set you on a different pathway. We're going to wrap around you and continue to help you until we feel like you have a good handle on what's going on with you. And I think that that's a remarkable way to just suggest that you have education, and then you have systems that have to respond differently because we can. And so I'm really excited about how we're trying to navigate that piece.
You go to school, and in almost every venue, they require that you have a physical, you pass your physical exam, your eyes are checked, your hearing is checked. Where's the brain check? There's nothing more important that there's some understanding of when you go to school on that first day than the status of your neurology. And in fact, there should be a brain check every year. There should be a continual monitoring of brain health in every child. Children are captive, and they're all in a place we can find them, pretty much all of them, they're there. Before they begin, 20-25% of them ultimately are going to stop going to school, don't ever graduate. Now in America, what a tragedy, how ridiculous is that? That's in part because we're not paying any attention to what's happening to them up here. You know, they progress to the point now, by the time they're in middle school or high school, to widespread disaster. 50% of females of high school age in America now are identified as mentally ill. What the hell is that? So since this is a progressive thing that's occurred with them, we should be monitoring them. We should be reacting to them. Now, we've been training individuals of school age in relatively simple ways. And basically, we find that in training of school-age children, basically middle school and in high school, that are identified as, quote, mentally ill or at high risk for progression of mental illness, about 60% of them can be converted to normal with a relatively simple sort of one semester long class. We've trained larger populations of individuals between age 18 and 25 in a study conducted in Australia. And among several hundred individuals who were mentally ill or who identified as a high risk for progression of mental illness, about 70% of them were moved into the normal category, again, by the equivalent of one semester class. Now, that training in either case did not have to end with one semester. We should always train, we should always think about driving changes in the brain to effect. We should adapt what we do, we should individuate what we do, we should intelligently modify what we do. We consider the individual weaknesses that are still present. We should be doing that all along and to drive everyone we can to normalcy. And I think if we did that, what we'd see is an amazing thing. Most people can sustain wellness. Most people can be well in the long term and maybe all across the life pretty much, so that we don't have to wait until the train is off the tracks. And I devoutly believe that that is the future. The future is sustaining wellness. The future is continually monitoring what's happening in our brain in ways that can ultimately lead to our being rolling off the tracks, and to respond to it. I mean, that is an intelligent scientific way to respond to this, what I think is a crisis in America, where in a sense we seem to be all in danger of going insane. And that is insane. That is insanity. Not responding to this on the basis of what we know scientifically is just ridiculous. So let's do it.
Mike, I just have a follow-up question for you. I'm curious, as you think about, I want to go back to an earlier point you made about the assessing in schools, right? I guess I'm curious, especially given the other comments made about just a wide range, I think, of student experiences as they're coming into school, that their varying levels of traumas that they experience. Do you feel like, what's your sense of the current state of assessment in the able to, I guess, meet the needs of the diverse kinds of students that we have?
We developed assessments that are sort of brain-based as opposed to behavioral-based. I don't want to say exactly what we do. But we have a very strong ability to identify children with that. There's a very, very high correlation with the identification of the so-called ACEs. This is adverse childhood experience histories of the child. We can see that a child, on the basis of this this relatively simple computerized assessment, we can identify the child that has had a history of abuse or real struggles in their early life. And that's a critical population, because a large percentage of individuals that are really struggling in school and struggling in life, or are going to get in trouble in life in all kinds of ways, have that kind of history. In a variety of other ways, basically, you can, there was a statement earlier, we don't know how to assess brains, or we don't have the tools to assess brains. Actually, that's not correct. We know enough about the operational characteristics of a healthy brain so that within, let's say, 8 or 10 minutes, I can have a pretty clear picture of the general organic health of a brain, equivalent in power to measuring your blood pressure and heart rate and looking at oxygenation in blood, as it gives you an initial evaluation of the status of your cardiovascular and pulmonary health. And that could lead us to respond to it. That should be the minimal thing that happens every time you go to the doctor. Just like every time you go to the doctor, they measure your blood pressure. There should be some objective implementation of a simple strategy that looks at your physical organic brain health. I'd like to emphasize that it's beyond behavior. It's the brain as a physical and functional organ. We need to be looking at that as well as behavior. And we need to correct that as well as, in a sense, correcting behavior. They're not the same thing. They're related, of course, but they're not the same thing.
Thank you. We've talked about some of these different systems, right? Both justice system, education system. So let's pretend we optimize the education system. We've optimized the justice system. It'll take maybe a year or two, right? But we're almost there, right? But then we have people who are, especially in lower income communities, who have jobs, right, that are in environments that are not optimizing brain health, right? What are thoughts on what we can do kind of on that front?
Wow. Well, I mean, that gets at a larger issue, right? And so part of the work I'm doing now is building whole communities. And also, we just started, which I'm very proud of, launched a movement called Good Soul, which is a supportive ecosystem for minority-owned businesses. We launched it in May. We have over 20,000 small businesses on our platform so far. As a matter of fact, shameless plug, we're hosting our Good Soul Forum right here in Dallas, June 13th through the 15th, and we're looking forward to that. And the idea is to take an entrepreneur and put them in proximity to financial partners, capacity building partners, obviously the peer-to-peer network, and really help them at each stage of their life cycle. And so in the same way we're doing that for entrepreneurs, we need to be able to do that for whole communities, right? And I don't know what that looks like, but it's a larger problem than just what we're talking about here, because you're talking about removing all sorts of systemic barriers that have persisted in many of low-income communities for generations. But it's possible. It is absolutely possible. And if there's one thing I've taken from what I've heard so far, just a little bit here today, is the possibility of what we can do together if we just actually do it, right? And that's the power of this. And so, there are many people in those spaces, building communities, thinking about it holistically, making sure that there are we have an investment in one right now in my hometown in Baltimore, right, where there's a multifamily and there's mixed-use space with retail and solving all of the problems that are in that community. So every problem from accessibility to healthy foods to healthcare, all of those things are right there in their community, planted. Those sort of things are happening. Yeah. We just need more of that.
Well, that's great. And it sounds like, I wonder if those are also opportunities, right? I think about both the examples you shared, with the, it's meeting people where they are, right? And opportunities, to bring in, kind of Mike's point around assessment, right? I mean, I wonder if you see opportunities to bring in kind of brain health assessments in these community health spaces, as well as,
Absolutely.
actually, as well as, I guess, in your, entrepreneurship group. I mean, that's a high stress probably.
There's no reason
that
why
probably
brain
need it.
health shouldn't be connected to Good Soul in some sort of way. If you're not well, your business can't be well.
Right.
Right. If we're going to make those connective points, if we're going to connect those dots, to Mike's point of what he's been really harping on, empathy has to really be the lens through which we look and how to do that. Mm-hmm. And I often say empathy doesn't need a lot of details, but it does need a mirror. If you can see yourself in that situation, then you can really help somebody else.
We're trying to develop a model in which it's a little bit complicated to explain, but how do you get to everybody? And one of the ways that we're trying to get to everybody is by the creation of something that I call a Brain Health Academy. And it's not a brick and mortar building, it's a presence in every neighborhood, in every town, in every village, in which there is there's somebody that's responsible for seeing that everybody has their brain health monitored annually, or at least annually, and who is responding to it. And the academy is responding, and it's responding maybe in the YMCA, maybe in the schoolhouse, maybe in the church basement. It's responding in the community, and basically trying to assure, and we're trying to sort out how we can get everyone in the community basically to be a participant in this, to see the value of it. So the question is, can we generate the kind of tsunami in understanding and interest, and basically bring people back together in the community with a common interest around, raising everybody's boat in the community by raising brain health broadly across the community. Then finally, I just say, when we train somebody, for example, that's in prison, we're very deliberately trying to train them, give them the idea that going back home, they can be an agent of change. And we're also trying to train those individuals in prison and offer them the opportunity for them to be a mentor to help people back in the community, back home, wherever they come from. Because we know probably back home, they're in a community in which other people are struggling. And so I think that's what we need. We need to generate these infections and figure out how we can generate these infections so that we can roll change into our communities.
I'm going to have Yolanda speak, and then I'm going to open it up for a few questions.
I just want to mention that to me, the source multiplier for brain health in communities that we see, particularly in the justice system, is just human interaction. Most of these folks that are really struggling day to day, it's funny because, over my history of working in the justice system, one of the things I did for a drug court program is I had a chef from La Cordon Bleu come in and actually prepare meals for people who had substance abuse issues that they were struggling with. And I got questioned, almost got kicked out of my job. And they were like, why do you have a chef in here cooking for these people? Like, you should not do that. Not really understanding that some of those people hadn't eaten all day, maybe that week, maybe never had a meal prepared by someone like a chef. But that simple human interaction created such a sense of humanity for them. They came in and they knew they were going to get a meal. And so human interaction is so important. And I just take that from the perspective that we're talking about brain health at a very high level, but most of these folks won't get to sit in these seats and have these high-level conversations. And so pulling down a little bit and trying to get to the root of how people interact with the world is so critical and so key to us making changes. And I just wanted to mention that because I think sometimes when we're in these educated settings where all of y'all are way smarter than me, at least, it's hard to imagine how to make it very granular and tangible so people can really reach it. So I would invite you to invite them in as you're making decisions about these big shifts and big changes in high-level technology, and just seeing how the human element really can inform your decisions about how you implement some of these changes.
All right. Maybe time for one question? Oh, no? Okay. I was told no. I'm sorry. After. All right. Sounds
She
good.
runs a tight ship.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna follow orders over here, so that's all good. Well, I just want to thank the panel once again, I think, for just sharing their brilliance. And so, yes, you are brilliant. Each of you, your time and insights, and look forward to continuing the conversation later. Thank you.
Thank you.